Struggling to survive in Sons of the Forest? Well, here's a little guide on everything I wish I knew before I started playing. Minor spoilers ahead. Crash sites are random. Every time you log in, you've got a chance of appearing at a different location, and this can drastically alter the difficulty of your beginning. So far I've counted at least 3, one in the mountains, one just below the mountain, and one on the East Coast beach. All 3 have some plus points, but they also have some negatives. The mountain might seem the hardest as it's in the snow, and of course that means you'll start to freeze, but you can actually quickly scamper down the mountain fairly easily. You certainly won't miss any of the items that are dropped alongside the crash, and from this high you can get a real general idea of exactly the map layout, as the GPS doesn't allow you to zoom out completely to see the full map. So weirdly for GPS, it doesn't actually list north, south, east or west. There may well be a compass that you find later in the game, but from everything I've seen in Discord and on Reddit, I can't see anyone saying they've found one. So you're going to have to really get used to actual landmarks and using that GPS to mark locations. I'll bet you might have to actually have some physical notes by your side. Hopefully in early access this will be improved. The pros of the beach spawn are that you're very close to the cave that has the rebreather and a stun gun, although it is filled with creepies, so it'll be quite challenging to get through. There's plenty of birds to go ahead and kill if you want sustenance, but you'd be surprised not to get any fish. It looks like the fish are actually only coming from the rivers. It seems all the dead fish that you find on the beach have been caused by some sort of toxic spill, meaning Kelvin won't go and get any fish while you're at the beach. If you go much further along the coast, you have got a chance of coming across some tortoises, and these are the ones that also give you a shell, whereas the ones that you find inland don't give you a shell. The crash site that you land on in the middle of the forest just below the mountain is the closest place to one of the locations where you'll find a 3D printer. I assumed when I first started playing that all the locations with a green circle would maybe house some sort of printer, but actually the first 3 that you come across in this part of the map, only one of them does. So I would consider this spawn the optimal spawn, as the 3D printer really does give you a head start. More on that later. Either way, most of the locations can still be travelled or traversed to without any problems, as long as you leave with plenty of daylight in between and you kind of just run away from any of the cannibals or the muddies that you come across. With the ability to pretty much make any save point anywhere and sleep through the night, just get Kelvin to do so, the game is definitely not as hard as it used to be in the original. To take full advantage of that, as soon as it starts to get a bit dark, make sure you get Kelvin to set up a site and then sleep the way through and then explore more during the day. Speaking of the icons you see on your GPS, the purple ones relate to GPS tokens. These can be used to give to your NPCs so you can always keep track of them. Kelvin already has one, but you can gain another 3 by exploring the purple places. Except there are some limitations. Some of them purple areas you will need more equipment to get some of them. To be honest, it's not worth going to all 3 until you actually get the right stuff. I'm going to spoil it now obviously, but you are going to need a shovel. Another location, you'd have to take a swim in shark infested waters, and one more location is probably the easiest. You can actually cut down a soldier and you'll be able to get the GPS tracker from him. This is part of the main story quest line that will progress further once you get all 3. As I mentioned, all 3 of the green circles doesn't signify completely safe spaces. The one with the 3D printer does act as a save point and a really good location just to get your first few days of survival done. One to the kind of right of the map, if you're looking at the 3 purple indicators towards the north, that one will be something you'll need the shovel to gain access to. And the last one, which I consider more north, is one that you go through into a kitchen area, but you won't be able to go much further than that. It'll give you a bunch of resources, but that's about it. It looks like all of these locations share one thing though. You'll be able to use a keycard once you find it to gain access to more areas. And I'm presuming come across maybe more challenging enemies. When it comes to the enemies, hopefully by now you've seen preview videos, you should know there's at least 3 factions so far. The muddies, the more mutant-like, smaller, scaredy cat creatures that will run around the forest and come and plague you now and then with screams and calls. The second faction are more traditional. They're the villagers or the normal cannibals. You'll find their little small encampments all around the map, and this is where you might find yourself woken up if you get defeated the first time. Just like the original, you'll get dragged to certain locations where you'll be able to cut yourself free, grab your backpack and hopefully run away. And then the creepies themselves. Remember, the creepies are mostly inside the caves and some of these places underground. So the more you explore these caves, the more you start opening up some of these bunkers, the more chance that these creepies and mutants are going to start leaving their caves. So don't be too in a rush to go ahead opening doors with keycards or digging your way through certain places until you've got a base established. And certainly some better weapons. Now the factions can fight each other, but more often than not I found that actually the muddies and the villagers didn't always interact with each other and still just kind of ganged up on me. You don't also have to go ahead and kill them the moment you see them, especially when they're in low numbers. You can pretty much get away with just running away, or sometimes they will kind of just leave you alone after a while. If you suddenly hear them start screaming full pelt, especially one of the female ones, or you see Kelvin drenched in blood, then you know it's time to give them a little bit of a warning. Also make sure that they're not trying to steal any of your base parts. For the villagers though, the main important thing about going to the place with the 3D printer is to make the mask. This is an absolute must if you want a bit of an easier time in the early days. You'll be able to craft a mask, whack it on anytime any villagers come up to you, and it'll pretty much scare them all. As long as you haven't attacked any, you should be good and they'll leave you alone and eventually wander off. Now this particular red mask does not work on the actual muddies, it's only the villagers. And so in the early days you won't come across too many mutants overground. It's all about encountering them when you go through the caves that you start to explore. So make sure you got your best gear on and maybe your running boots to really succeed in getting some of them valuable items that are usually found inside. These are the places you'll find the rebreather and the shovel. The original game was much smaller, so villages felt like you could recognise exactly where they were easier. With the map being so big, you can often come across chance encampments, and these are some of the best places that you can get some of the resources that you may be missing, particularly things like cloth and rope, which seem to be in a huge abundance in the original, are now a little bit more scarce. If you want to get to places, the paths really will lead you to different areas, but they will be patrolled more often by some of the NPC enemies. So don't be too afraid to go off the beaten track, and make sure that you do build your base a little way away from a path just to stop or reduce a little bit. Enemies will still come by your base every now and then, but certainly if you built quite a way away from a path, you've got less chance of encountering them. Please make sure you use and respect Kelvin properly. He can be an absolute godsend. I've seen quite a few players already saying that he's kind of useless. Maybe you're just not using him right. Obviously in the first days, if you're lucky enough to spawn in the forest near rivers, he'll get you an abundance of fish and you pretty much don't have to worry about food. Of course, helping him get you logs is another really important feature, twigs or rocks. But make sure that you build some actual holders. The more traditional things that you hold your logs in or rock holders, he can actually start to fill these up so that it's not all just dumped in a horrible mess. Kelvin won't accept any weapons and you don't have to worry about feeding him. Give him a little rest from time to time and you might notice that he's a bit quicker in his actions. If you're making him just work and work like a dog, eventually he will just sit down, or sometimes you might find him wandering off. Kelvin won't go into combat with you either, so you've got to be careful about how and where you use him. It might be a good idea to also just leave him, but he has got his other uses. He will point out to enemies sometimes if they're nearby and you've not misheard them. But that's the biggest takeaway. Make sure that you've got some holders for resources and he'll make a really good job of filling them up. I think later on we'll probably be having a chance to give him better equipped tools, possibly even the chainsaw, and he might be able to go ahead and get a lot more trees, as there is an option to give NPC stuff. But it looks like that is mostly reserved for Virginia. Virginia won't do any kind of building for you. She is the muscle, and you can have both of these NPCs following at the same time, and it looks like there is more. You can give her weapons and they'll hopefully be able to do and use them, but she does take a few days to earn her trust. She'll come up to you creepily dancing, and as long as you keep away from her and don't harm her, she'll eventually become and sit by your side. So make sure you've got an enticing campfire and you've got maybe a nice log bench or something for her to sit on. She might drop you some berries and you'll know you're making progress. Eventually you'll be able to give her one of the purple GPS locators that you found off of one of the free soldiers, and then that way you'll be able to keep track of her at all times. In multiplayer, if some troll or your friend accidentally kills any of your NPCs, you'll get another NPC fresh as soon as you start a new session. Be warned, in single player though, once you kill them, that's it, they're gone forever. They can be downed or possibly even killed by other enemies, but they should respawn again if you restart your session, as long as you're not the one that actually killed them. There are seasons in Sons of the Forest, and I was expecting it to be a little bit more gradual. What I noticed while skimming through in peaceful mode is that some of the trees will start to go a bit more golden, and effectively you'll start to get a little bit more of a hint that things are about to get colder. It does look like that the more closer to the mountain you are, the more chance you'll start seeing snowstorms, or you may come across places that there is a little bit of snow falling anyway. It looks like when you actually start the game, you also have a chance of spawning at any time in any season. But thankfully they don't last too long, only a matter of days, before reverting to quite a wet and windy few days. Here the winter lasted 5 days, so you're going to have to make sure you're prepared. So during them few days you will have to be a bit more careful with food. Kelvin won't be able to go and get fish from the rivers, as a lot of them will have frozen up, or they simply just won't have the fish in them, and you might find some of the berries are a lot scarcer. So it's important to get your drying rack up and ready and running so that you've got a good amount of food stored and ready. You should come into contact with less of the enemies during the cold days, as they also don't really want to be out there. And if you do come across them, they may have certain different types of gear on them, or maybe even some clothing. They also may be more dangerous during the winter time, as they're also struggling for survival, and so may be more prone to attacking you than they were during the summer. A big frustration I've seen early on is with the inventory system and how they've changed certain hotkeys. Instead of having just regular hotkeys like you would, it was always a bit odd how they did it. You had to combine your bag with items, and then that way you'd then be able to choose what slot it had. It was D-pad for controller or number keys for whatever it was on keyboard. But now that's kind of been done with almost like a radial system. Instead of having a hotkey where you can just press 2, 3 or 4, you have to hold down your inventory button to pull out your bag, and then that will hold the bag up in front of you. You can then scroll or use your controller to actually choose which item you want, and that's how you quickly choose from one item to another. It's meant to be more immersive. It is kind of a pain in the butt, but it does bleed into the rest of the game's ethic about being more immersion. Also, make sure you're zooming all around your inventory. You'll be surprised how many people have complained that they can't see items. You can actually move all around your bag. It does get a bit slower and it takes a bit of effort scrolling your mouse to every corner or using the actual joysticks, but you should be able to look and see everything. The game definitely needs a drop item button. As I said, if you've not played the first one, you've got to look at that cog and it will tell you all the recipes that you'll be able to make currently. Although once you find new items, that will expand. So always keep checking a cog, even with an item that you've already scanned before, whenever you get any new gear, just to see if it combines and makes something brand new. And then finishing off with the special items. As I said, they're locked away in certain caves or certain spots. You can find weapons in certain places like the lifeboat, machetes and shotguns. But the stuff to progress, where you might have to get even harder to reach items, that is going to take a bit more work. The shovel, for example, you're going to need the rebreather to get to, as well as a zipline hook. So if you're having a real trouble or head scratcher trying to work out how to get an item because it seems impossible, then clearly you might need some more better equipment to come and get it. And some last nuggets of information for you. You can turn off structure damage in the options. That means anytime Kelvin accidentally chops a tree down, you're not going to say goodbye to your base. There's a whole bunch of infinite glitches at the moment in various different ways, so look around if you want to have a million logs. You can find different armor sets and clothing items, so if you're wondering why you haven't been able to equip something, it might actually be for Kelvin or Virginia. It does appear there may be a third NPC later on in the game. At the moment it looks like the game isn't scaling that much, although you will encounter more and more attacks, more ferocious ones as you keep getting deeper in the game. Regardless of how many caves you might have still triggered, the actual villagers and the muddies will start increasing. Use the mouse scroll button or middle button to go ahead and click whenever you're looking at your GPS. This allows you to signal through the different markers, although again it seems like there's some sort of glitch, as I'm pretty sure you should be able to mark the actual GPS map instead of only just relying on these. And as of recording, there was a substantial glitch with gate doors in fences, so don't bother trying to build any. Also, don't forget to hold the X button on a controller or C to go ahead and remove items that you've built. This is also how you can pick up the tarp and reuse the same tarp over and over again. And there we go, that's everything I wish I knew before I started playing Sons of the Forest. Let me know of your top tips in the comments section, and look out for more guides from me, and also come and check out my 100 days playthrough. I'm live streaming on my brand new channel devoted to 100 days of survival games. I've already got a movie version of the original Forest up, and I'll be doing 100 days of Sons of the Forest in the next couple of weeks. The first live stream will be on Sunday at 3 PM UK time, and it's going to be daily for at least the next 2 weeks. Laters, ratbags.